Roblox is a multi-billion-dollar corporation with thousands of employees working around the clock to keep the platform running, and one of their most veteran employees is this man, Deepak Murali Chandrasekaran, better known as Sorkus. He joined Roblox in 2011 and currently works as their vice president of product development. He's become well known over the years for being somewhat of a troll and has a few avatar items named after him, one of which is a limited hat with 170k Rolamons value, so you may already know about him. Sorkus has a pretty active life outside of Roblox as well though. He enjoys other video games and loves everything to do with the fantasy genre. In fact, he once revealed in a 2011 interview that he was actually writing his own fantasy novel, and very soon after that he started releasing sneak peeks of it in the form of blog posts. Blog posts that would over the years change the Roblox catalog and Roblox as a whole forever. You've definitely seen the items they were responsible for creating before, but you definitely don't know how much lore is behind them, and that's okay. I'm here to tell you all about it. This is the story of the most deep-rooted rivalry in the history of Roblox. Korblox versus Redcliff. Now, while Sorkus only started working at Roblox in 2011, this story actually starts 2 years before that, in 2009. On June 6th of that year, a blog post written by Bright Eyes was uploaded to Roblox's official blog. It was called Hat and Gear Bonanza, and it introduced some new war-themed hats onto the catalog, including an item called the Korblox Mandible Helmet. Its description reads, "The Korblox are a ruthless clan of barbarians from the frozen wastes of Robloxia's Northlands. They eat the weak." Now, this was most likely originally intended to be a one-off hat. Roblox wanted to make a barbarian helmet, and to add to its authenticity, they made up a name that sounded intimidating enough to go along with it. However, a few months later, they decided to upload another hat called the Korblox Death Speaker hat, which gave us a bit more insight into this supposed clan. Its description reads, "Each of the 12 Korblox tribes is led by a single Death Speaker. They wage perpetual war against each other in the Forsaken Northlands." This was followed by a retexture of the Korblox Mandible hat called Korblox Chosen, which gave us an even more in-depth look into the Korblox. Its description reads, "Life in the Korblox lands is not lived, but rather forged. The icy Great North has long since beat weakness out of the Korblox tribes, and the merely strong have been culled over millennia of constant conflict. Thus, the Korblox are a mighty race. Individuals who seek to lead the Korblox armies must prove their prowess by making a journey deep under the ice to the burned lands and return to present a living ruby to the clan Death Speaker. Many do not return, but those who do are marked as chosen." Things got even more interesting with the introduction of the Korblox Ice Zombie hat in 2010. Description read, "The vanquished foes of the Korblox live a second life as some of their most fierce soldiers. They will dwell in that bleak icy waste for all eternity. A ruthless clan of barbarians separated into 12 perpetually warring tribes who had the power to raise the dead." Now people were interested. However, after all that, Roblox seemingly abandoned the concept of the Korblox altogether. That is, of course, until 2011, when Sorkus entered the scene. When Sorkus first joined the Roblox team, he worked as a software engineer, but when he wasn't writing code, he was coming up with new accessory ideas, most of which were fantasy related. And on April 11th, 2011, he would announce some of these items by uploading a new blog post titled Wizard Tower Loot. Now, this post didn't look like anything special, but it did seem to leave a bit of context out. It started with the line, "Early this week, the wizard towers in the northern part of Robloxia were looted." But who were these wizards? Since when were there towers full of wizards in Robloxia? What did this line even mean? Fortunately, just 5 days later, Sorkus would create a new blog post to give us a bit more of the story. With their tower looted, the weakened wizards are struggling to hold off a zombie invasion from the freezing mountains of Korbloxia. Hearing of their zombie troubles, their honorable allies, the Knights of Redcliff, have started marching from the center of Robloxia to the wizard's mighty tower. The question that remains to be answered is, how many knights are willing to join the fray? Now, this blog post did a lot of things. Firstly, it resurrected the concept of the Korblox clan. Now, though, instead of just a random clan of barbarians, we knew that they had zombies on their side as well. It also established the presence of a group of knights whose job it is to stop these Korbloxians, the Knights of Redcliff. So now that we had a group of good guys, a group of bad guys, and a massive war between them, people started to become interested in how things would play out. Well, in the next post, things would get more complicated. It read, "With the grand war between the Korblox and the Knights of Redcliff imminent, the ninja and the samurai factions are offering their allegiance. The ninjas are going for the highest bounty, and the samurai for honor." Just like that, 2 more groups had been added to this hypothetical war. But what was even more important than that was what was hidden at the bottom of the post, a link to a brand new group run by Sorkus called Knights of Redcliff. People who followed this link would be greeted by the following description. "Born to defend Robloxia from all that is mortal evil, we, the Redcliff Knights, inhabit the center of the Robloxian world. With honor we defend, with pride we protect the weak from the ruthless Korbloxian invasion." Founded by the mighty knight Zargus in 1324 IR, when he and his knights finally managed to exile the barbarian King Cannabis and his men out of Robloxia, currently led by his descendant Sorcus. The age is 1543 IR. This is both a roleplay group and a war group. We do not impose any restrictions on the members. This is an official clan recognized by Roblox. Essentially, what this meant was that the players who joined this group would get to roleplay as the good guys, the Knights of Redcliff, learning fighting skills and serving under Sorcus himself. But that wasn't all. The blog post also hinted at an upcoming real in-game war between the Redcliff and the Korblox. This made people extremely excited. Because it was an official group recognized by Roblox, if they could do something of significance in this war, people would be talking about them for a while. It gave everyone a chance to make an impact on something. And so, the members started flooding in. In the next few weeks, several more blog posts would be published in order to hype up the war even more. Sorcus described all the evil things the Korbloxians were doing to these wizards while they were waiting for the Knights to arrive, and then introduced another new clan called the Splintered Sky Knights. They were a clan of blue armored flying knights who were in charge of keeping the peace and excelled in fast ranged combat. Unfortunately, in this post, it seemed like the wizards were starting to lose. Apparently, an ancient and powerful artifact of theirs had been taken by Korblox, and that artifact combined with the Korblox's evil magic would shift the battle in the Korblox's favor. Yes, the Korbloxians were also dark magicians now. The wizards brought out some ancient forgotten artifacts that were supposed to be sealed away forever in an effort to hold on for as long as possible. But unfortunately, their efforts were in vain because the Redcliff Knights who were supposed to be coming to their aid got distracted by a surprise ambush from those ninjas mentioned earlier. Additionally, the old artifacts they were using ended up corrupting their minds and made some of them only able to use magic to make cursed evil weapons. And there was a looming threat of the ultra-powerful dark wizard Dracovan getting resurrected at any moment, along with the threat of the Emerald Knights of the Seventh Sanctum coming in and destroying everyone involved in the war to keep the peace. So yeah, things weren't looking too good for the wizards. And unfortunately, in the last blog post Sorcus ever posted addressing the situation, the wizard tower had fallen. The ninjas, now referred to as the Dark Age ninjas, slowly started rising to power along with the Korblox. And that was the end. To me at least, it seems like Sorcus was planning on making more blog posts in the future describing a sort of redemption arc for the wizards, Sky Knights, and Redcliff. But unfortunately, nothing like that ever happened. The novel that all of this was apparently taken from was never finished, and the massive war event that Sorcus hinted at never happened. But the story didn't end there. After the whole blog post thing was done, Sorcus never leaked any more of the story to the public, but that wasn't good enough for certain people. If Sorcus wasn't going to continue the story for Roblox, then Roblox would have to try to continue the story on its own. And so, over the next few months, various groups were created to represent all the different factions described in the story. A group for the wizards, called the Wizards of the Astral Isles, was created by then-admin Hoththoth as the blog posts were being released, but it seemingly laid dormant, not accepting anyone in, for a couple months until an unknown date. User Angel Atheist created the Emerald Knights of the Seventh Sanctum group to represent the Emerald Knights. Another group, called the Knights of the Splintered Skies, was created by then-intern Newt Rat to represent the Splintered Sky Knights. User Shadow777777 created a group called Korblox's Empire to represent the Korblox clan, and an alt account of Sorcus's called Eris eventually created a group for the Dark Age ninjas. But that never really got off the ground. And the Samurai, we don't talk about them. Because of Sorcus, Hoththoth, and Newt Rat's influence at Roblox, they were quickly able to turn each of their groups and the rest of the groups I just mentioned into something called an official Roblox clan. This basically meant that their names and the concepts they made would be owned and used by Roblox and things like avatar items and toys, so it was definitely a big deal for them. In each of these groups, players would roleplay as a member of the fantasy guild that their group represented, trying to work their way through the ranks, develop their fighting skills, and take home victories for their side. The relationships between these groups went as follows. Redcliff, Splintered Skies, and Wizards were allied with each other and enemies with the Korblox. All of them were neutral towards the Emerald Knights of the Seventh Sanctum, and vice versa. If the Dark Age ninjas ever did anything, they would be allies with the Korblox and enemies with everyone else except the Emerald Knights. The main groups that everyone cared about, though, were the Redcliff, Korblox, Sky Knights, and Wizards. They were who the original Great War was going to be centered around, and hopefully with these community-driven groups, that war would still have a shot at happening. As the years went on, though, with no major war in sight, the groups started to get bored, and decided to pass the time by doing their own thing. As a result, each of these groups began to gain a life of its own, with the leaders creating their own canon lore to the best of their ability out of the scraps of knowledge given by the continuous supply of Roblox item descriptions and real-life in-game events. Now, we're going to be taking a look at how each group evolved in detail, but before we do that, I'd like to give a massive shout out to the Loreverse community on Discord and Roblox. They're a small community made up of veteran leaders and players alike from the earliest days of this story, and if you have a question about literally anything related to the official groups, someone there has an answer. Not to mention the fact that they have continued to keep fleshing out the lore of these groups to this day and are planning a massive project related to that lore at some point in the future. So overall, awesome group. I would highly recommend joining them if you want to know more about this. Specifically, I'd like to mention Discord users Iron Giant 11, Super, Michael, Slayer of Tears, and Zerky. This video would literally not be possible without their help, so thank you all so much. Anyway, with that being said, let's get into the individual tales of the 4 largest official clans of Roblox. Since the Knights of Redcliff were the originals, let's talk about them first. The group currently sits at 13k members. It's still owned by Sorkus himself, and even though he doesn't interact with it that much anymore, his subordinates still keep it pretty active, with the group shout changing often and many group wall posts per day. There's also a very well formatted guide linked in its description that describes exactly how the group operates. So how did the Knights of Redcliff come about in the first place? Well, lucky for us, Loreverse member Slayer of Tears wrote out a story that describes the creation and first years of the group's existence based on a combination of Roblox created lore and real life events. Let's read it together. Redcliff was once a powerful kingdom. Richard was Redcliff's last king, and then he abolished the monarchy. After that, it slowly became nothing more than an ancient order, until the present day. The wizard's tower was looted, weakening them. Sorkus, the living descendant of the mighty king Zargus, who was responsible for exiling the Korblox to the frozen wastelands, heard news of this and began rebuilding the ancient order known as the Knights of Redcliff. Two brothers, Shagabash and Flaminblade, were recruited and helped spread news about Redcliff. Benzo Talgan, Benzo 2 on Roblox, was recruited, and he began training apprentices in preparation for their grand march. Shagabash traveled the land and encountered the mercenary leader Vilcata. He dueled him and lost, but recruited him in the end. Benzo, Flaminblade, Shagabash, and Vilcata were given the title of Mason and a new task: build up a kingdom. Redcliff became a legion of 1,000 strong, and new armor was crafted in celebration. This is a reference to how when the group hit 1,000 members, Sorkus got Roblox to give everyone in the group a special knight helmet called Redcliff Infantry. Redcliff's first city was completed and celebrations were held there. The group of Masons was formally disbanded, and Benzo, Flaminblade, Shagabash, and Vilcata were given new titles and armor to match: Enchanted Knights. Shagabash eventually stepped down from active duty and stayed behind in the city to continue building the kingdom. Meanwhile, Redcliff's march began. The Redcliff Knights were ambushed by the Dark Age ninjas, and the Wizard's Tower fell, as did their town. The march ended, and the Knights took what survivors from the Wizards they could and retreated back to their city. Benzo, Flaminblade, and Vilcata were effectively put in charge of Redcliff as acting leaders and liaisons under the Windwalker Sorkus himself, and given new armor and a new rank: Elite Commander. Sorkus met an ambassador from the Knights of the Splintered Sky, leading to him traveling with Flaminblade to their city. While taking in refugees in the Windwalker's absence, Benzo and Vilcata noticed some discrepancies in information, resulting in knights being misplaced or spread too thin to properly defend their borders. As they investigated, the capital was attacked. The attack was repelled due to the combined might of Benzo and Vilcata, and they discovered one of their own, a Knight of the Order, had betrayed them. The first public execution was held in Redcliff City, and Benzo Talgan beheaded the traitor. Later, their name and presence would be stricken from all records by Vilcata, erasing the traitor's identity from history. Sorkus returned from his ambassador trip and set up a system to prevent such an attack from happening again. Elite Commander Flaminblade stepped down and was replaced by an up-and-coming knight, Ricers, and that unfortunately is where his story ended. However, it is a good indicator of how fun and turbulent the group was back then. So much backstabbing, raiding, and promotion went on that there was always something to do, and always good memories to be made. It sounds like an extremely fun time. The Knights of Redcliff group has a lot to offer in terms of things to do. If you just joined, you'll want to be on the lookout for a training session, which usually happens once on Saturday and once on Sunday. For a training session, a high-rank member will make a group shout telling everyone to join them in one of the Redcliff training facilities, which I'll talk about more in a bit. After a short time, everyone who joins will be assembled into a group, and then be told what to practice. Depending on what game the training is taking place in, you could be asked to do several different exercises, from dueling to ranged combat practice to even obbies if they want to test your agility. The high-rank member officiating the training will give out points to trainees if they do well in a particular exercise, and if you obtain enough points, they may decide to give you a promotion. The Knights of Redcliff also host game nights, where members visit a game made by a non-Redcliffian just to relax and have fun, and recruitment sessions where they attempt to recruit more members in recruiting games. There's also one other event that I had never really heard of any other group doing before now. It's called Bard's Night, and it's an event where members will gather in a Redcliffe-owned place and hear stories from veteran members about things that happened in the group long ago. I find that to be a very interesting idea, and I'm not sure why more groups don't do that, because it sounds extremely fun. Upon joining the group, you'll be ranked as an apprentice. To rank up from there, you'll need to do well in trainings. If you obtain 1 to 2 points in a training as an apprentice, you'll be considered for a promotion to the next level. Alternatively, you can also buy a Redcliffe-themed bundle or gear, which will automatically grant you 1 free promotion to the next level as long as you tell a high-ranking member about it. The next level can be one of 2 ranks. If you're offered a promotion as an apprentice, you can choose to become either an archer or a knight. If you're better with ranged combat than melee, you'll want to become an archer, whereas if you're better with melee than ranged, you'll want to become a knight. However, do keep in mind that in the description of the Redcliffe sword and shield gear, Roblox officially states that knights are second to archers, so choose your role carefully. Once you've chosen your path, if you get 3 to 4 points during a training, you'll be considered for another promotion to Elite Archer if you were an archer before, or Drac Knight if you were a knight. These essentially play the same roles as the previous level, except they're capable of a lot more. The next level is where promotions start to get tricky. If you obtain 5 points in a training, the high ranks will discuss whether or not you're ready to be promoted to Enchanted Knight. Enchanted Knights are meant to excel at both melee and ranged combat, and they're expressly handpicked by the high ranks for their maturity and activity. So even if you're a prodigy who ends up getting 5 points on your first training, you're likely not going to be promoted to Enchanted Knight right away. And now we come to the high rank levels. No one gets promoted to these levels unless someone who is already in one of those levels leaves their position, and in some cases, only if Sorkus explicitly gives his permission for that position to be filled. If one of those roles needs filling, it's usually by someone in the role below it, specifically handpicked by the people above it. First are the Knights of the Order and Master Rangers. There will always be 4 of both of these roles, and their job is to officiate trainings. Knights of the Order are usually more skilled with melee, while Master Rangers are more skilled with ranged combat. Then there's a special rank called Counselor, which is specially reserved for the owners of the other official clan groups and Roblox staff. This role has to be assigned by Sorkus. Legion Commanders are, in a sense, the managers of the managers. They help out with training, but they also generally oversee the group, as well as the Knights of the Order and Master Rangers. In a similar vein, the Elite Commanders are the managers of the managers of the managers, having power over everything the Legion Commanders do and more. Elite Commanders also have to be handpicked by Sorkus, because the next and final role, Windwalker, is reserved for Sorkus himself. So, judging by Sorkus' declining activity in the group, you may not be able to expect to be promoted to Elite Commander anytime soon, but it's still very possible to rise through the group's ranks and leave your mark if you put in the work. Over the years, the Knights of Redcliff have created a ton of impressive forts, cities, and training facilities, but for this section, I'll just focus on their top 3 most impressive ones. First up is Whisper Wharf. It's not much to look at, just a small rocky island with an inner chamber, an obby, some dueling platforms, and a few miscellaneous odds and ends. But what is there is extremely tastefully built. There's details everywhere, from the curviness of the rocks to the ambience of this inner sanctum to the secludedness of this second island that I didn't even know about until my 3rd time playing the game. It's simple but extremely effective in a way that is unmatched by any other Redcliff game. And if I had to describe the complete opposite of that, I would say it's my next pick, the Redcliff Furnace. This is an incredibly complex and detailed game, and it is a hellish environment. It's packed with chains, lava, and general hazards at every turn, and yet somehow, when you step into the main building, it still feels like you're with the good guys. If I had to use a simple phrase to describe this game, it would be an English tavern run by Satan. But it's not just beer drinking that goes on here. There's so much to do, including archery practice, an obby that takes you around the entire map, and an entire area specifically reserved for Bard Knights. This is definitely one of the most terrifying yet fun games that I've played in a while. My final pick is a lot less dangerous, but that doesn't mean it's not incredibly impressive. Port Rodak is possibly the most expansive game that the Knights of Redcliff have ever created. Sure, there are some slight building errors here and there, but one can easily look past those and see how much effort was put into this place. It really feels like an ancient city that's slowly been built up over the years. In fact, the map is so wide that it doesn't render all the way unless you're on maximum graphics. Not to mention all the secrets hidden around here, like this obby that I'm pretty sure takes you all around town, but I wouldn't know considering that I fell off somewhere around here. I wholeheartedly enjoyed this place and would recommend it to anyone who has a few hours to kill. 10 out of 10. Finally, let's take a look at some of the items that Roblox has created to represent this group over the years. In terms of good items, we have the Redcliff Knight Bundle, which is extremely classic and probably the first thing you think of when you think of Redcliff. It goes great with the Redcliff Battle Axe, which I think is a pretty sleek and subtle way of adding Redcliff to your avatar. Another way to do that is through this Redcliff pin, which you may or may not have noticed that I'm actually wearing right now. If I had to pick a Redcliff helmet that I enjoyed the aesthetic of the most, it would be the Redcliff Winged Ninja Knight. And of course we can't forget about the basket of medieval rabbit valor, because not only is it a good looking gear, it's also incredibly funny. Also, fun fact, Roblox uploaded a mesh and texture for a Redcliff themed Dominus at one point, but never actually published it as a real hat. It's a shame because if they had done that, it probably would be not only a big source of publicity for the Redcliff group, but also the best item ever created. Of course, not every Redcliff themed item is a winner. Around 2019, when Arthro was first being introduced, Roblox uploaded a bunch of Arthro Redcliff characters, including the incredibly overpriced Redcliff General and the Redcliff Warrior, which until very recently shared the name of the free bundle Redcliff Paladin. The Redcliff Sword and Shield is also pretty dumb looking in my opinion. It's not sharp and it just looks like a big slab of rock. Overall though, the Redcliff lineup of items is very impressive, and judging by these Arthro bundles, it seems like Roblox will continue to make them for a while, so I'll be excited to see what's in store. Overall, the Knights of Redcliff is a great choice of group to join if you're just getting into this topic. As the main characters of the story, they have connections to every other group and tales to last you for days. I had an incredibly fun time researching them and would recommend joining them any day. It's at least better than this. Next up is Korblox's Empire, which, unfortunately, is dead. It currently sits at around 3.5k members, and since the join request I sent them around a week ago still hasn't been accepted yet, I've gotta assume no one else is getting in either. By all accounts, the current owner, former admin Ostrich Size, has not really interacted with the group at all since inheriting it from Shadow777777, and the person who was leading it in his stead, Spikeboy1011, has stopped playing Roblox entirely. Fortunately, the memories still live on, and through archives and anecdotes from former active group members like Zerky, I was able to create a pretty solid profile of what it was like to be a Korbloxian. Canonically, the Korblox Empire began when the powerful knight Zargus defeated the ancient king Canavus and his clan of barbarians, who were exiled to the frozen wastelands of the north. After that, the story is picked up by a timeline described by Zerky, a former high-ranking member who went by the name Mage King. Apparently, after getting exiled, the barbarians were forced to eat crystals and metal to survive, which started transforming them into monsters who had those materials covering their whole bodies. They started to grow restless with each other out there, and split off into 12 tribes, each one becoming skilled at a different evil proficiency. The Bloodbringer tribe loved blood and gore, and were often used as fodder and shock troops during wars, since it not only made them money, but also blood. In fact, they loved blood so much that their territory was bordered by a thick red wall of blood vapor referred to as the Crimson Veil. The Runeforger tribe was the Korblox Empire's enchanters, frequently designing extremely high-quality enchanted weapons that were practically unstoppable on the battlefield. They were also very secretive of their techniques though, so they moved to the middle of an extremely hard-to-reach area known as the Howling Shards. The Cerebellum tribe loved everything to do with slaves. They made their money selling slaves, got slaves to do all of their work for them, and were always on the lookout for prisoners to turn into slaves. To keep their slaves alive, they lived in a warmer area called the Bubbling Pits. The Frostflame tribe actually managed to master pyromancy with an interesting substance called cold fire, which combined with their natural cold resistance allowed them to withstand any temperature and get past any fire immunity charms. Because of their temperature tolerance, they were able to claim a lot of territory on the border of the Frozen Wastes. The Dreadwing tribe managed to tame the ancient ice dragons that inhabited the Frozen Wastes, and helped the Empire use them for everything from transportation to protection. They lived near the Runeforgers in the Howling Shards, but tended to stay more towards the top of the tallest mountain there, Everfrost Summit. The Frostbone tribe highly valued ancient and traditional ways of combat, and had the tendency to rip bones out of their own bodies to use as weapons when they needed to. They lived in the ruins of an old fort called Whiteblind, among the corpses of thousands of Redcliff soldiers that fell during a massive battle there. The Necroborn tribe was in charge of creating the zombie armies that the Korblox Empire often used in battle. They were sort of a mediocre tribe, so not much else is known about them. The Fleshwork tribe loved to use magic to modify their bodies in sick and twisted ways in an effort to enhance certain aspects of themselves. They also loved to create weird Frankenstein-like monsters out of dead things that could help serve the Empire. Again, not much else is known about them. The Blightbreak tribe loved to use viruses and potions against their enemies, and all this experimenting with viruses often left them horribly disfigured and weak. They lived on a flat piece of ice that slowly became strangely colored and populated with alien-like animals and plant life as their work with strange viruses continued. The members of the Mythi tribe were the scholars of the Empire, responsible for coming up with new spells and producing books and tomes. They lived in heavily guarded fortresses. The Flux Reap tribe loved trading with anyone and everyone, and did everything they could to obtain as much money as possible. They were the Empire's best business people. They lived in the dead center of the Frozen Wastes, but they also had outposts set up in the territories of every other tribe so that they could sell to them. The Skullhelm tribe hated magic and mocked anyone who used it, going so far as to wear the skulls of any mages they killed like helmets. Because of this, they lived at the bottom of the only series of chasms and ravines in the Frozen Wastes that held no magical properties whatsoever. And finally, there was the Iceheart tribe. It was only made up of a few Empire members, but those members were the best of the best. The Icehearts were an elite squad handpicked by the Empire's leader, and they were always in the middle of every battle, essentially carrying the entire thing. Any member of this tribe could take on a raiding party single-handedly any day. Each of these tribes were led by a Death Speaker, and they were perpetually at war with each other, just like the description of the original Korblox Death Speaker hat said. This state would not last forever though. Eventually, King Canavus died, and his successor, General Grom, a character played by Spikeboy 1011, was ordered to take over the leadership of the Empire by Archlord Ostrich-Size. Grom, while allowing the tribe members to keep their unique abilities, ordered them to be at peace with each other and unite as one fighting force. And so, the Korblox Empire became a powerful military unit that would work together to get back the filthy Redcliff soldiers that had exiled them all those years ago. In general, the Korblox Empire group was miles more strict and militaristic than Redcliff. There were no fun events like game nights or bard nights to be had. The only thing the Korblox Empire ever did that could be classified as an event was trainings. Trainings for the Korblox Empire were conducted similarly to those conducted by the Knights of Redcliff, only with a lot more rules. Proper grammar was fiercely enforced, with no emojis, acronyms, or incomplete sentences allowed. Everyone was required to wear the official Korblox uniform or Korblox-themed character bundle, and if they did not have enough Robux for this, they could not be a part of the training. Speaking out of turn was also a harshly punishable offense, and when referring to higher-ups, it was mandatory to call them by their rank or by sir. The trainings themselves featured a lot of combat, obviously, but there was also usually a speech or lecture from the high-ranking host before the actual training started. In 2014, a new rule was applied that required every member of Korblox to join a group representing one of the Korblox tribes. This would be so that each member could train for the specific discipline that suited them best. Runeforgers would train with magical weapons, Skullhelms would train with conventional melee weapons, etc. However, groups were only ever created for 6 out of the 13 tribes, and nothing much was ever really done with those groups. There were definitely a ton of rules to follow, and these rules were changing constantly, but if you managed to keep to them, you had a good chance of getting promoted. New recruits to the Korblox Empire were referred to as Ice Zombies. Ice Zombies were expected to already keep perfect grammar when speaking, have the Korblox Empire's history memorized, be active, respectful, and have advanced combat skills. Failure to demonstrate those skills at any point would result in an exiling from the group. If you managed to perform these skills well enough, though, you'd be moved to the next level, Mandible. In addition to all the Ice Zombie skills, Mandibles were expected to develop excellent teamwork skills and memorize proper formations. Once they did that, they could move up to the Bladesman rank. Bladesmen needed to be proficient at every type of combat, able to enforce the rules, and be mainly devoted to Korblox Empire, which I assume meant having the group set as their primary group. After that, they could enter the Basher rank, where they would learn to lead and discipline others, develop basic strategy skills, and generally stand out as role models. And after that, well, now we're getting into the high ranks, and things start to get a whole lot tougher. Next was the Elite rank, for which you needed to master leadership and strategy, make several large and meaningful contributions to the group, and be sworn in under several oaths given by one of the generals. From there, you could become a Chosen, for which you needed to take an apprenticeship course under General Grom himself. You needed to demonstrate complete leadership over your tribe and be skilled beyond mastery at basically everything related to war. Because Grom never got around to adding the Death Speaker role, this role was essentially its equivalent. Next was the Korblox Assassin role, which was only given to owners of the other lore groups and Roblox admins. And after that, the only step up was to become a general yourself. Even though in this guide, Grom states that you can only reach general rank if the current general ever leaves his position, the current presence of 4 generals leads me to believe that that rule was eventually abolished. And that, aside from ostrich-sized role of Archlord, was the entire hierarchy of Korblox's empire. Because of the group's inactivity, its training facilities and strongholds haven't really been updated since 2015, so the building standards aren't exactly the highest. However, there are still some that are pretty impressive. First is the Necromancy training facility. According to the description, it was once a Redcliff base that ended up being corrupted by Xerki and rebuilt in the Korblox Empire's image. It's full of evil-looking decorations and places to train. There's also a surprising amount of interactivity to this game too. There's this group of necromancers who are trying to raise this corpse from the dead and are very annoyed that you keep breaking their focus, and there's these evil eye teleporters that let you get from place to place with ease. It's definitely one of the more detailed Korblox places, and given the opportunity, I would be pretty happy to train here. Then there's the Cavern training facility. Now, it's not as big as the Necromancy facility width-wise, but it is extremely tall. That combined with the lack of inner walls causes you to really get a sense of how big this place is. It really is one of the most evil-feeling training facilities I've ever seen. You feel hopeless, like you're trapped in a ravine and you're never getting out, which I guess is kind of the intended vibe, so great job, I guess. Finally, we have Mandoom Strongholds. Now, while I don't really think this place is as evil-looking as the Cavern training facility, I do think that it's the most mysterious-looking. It's not really a room at all. It's actually a sort of long, empty hallway that will leave you unsure of what to expect at every turn. The decorations are minimal, but the ones that are there are so big and foreboding that you can't help but be intimidated by them. It is a bit of a letdown that it just sort of ends at an empty ledge overlooking a flat gray surface, but as they say, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And this journey is something that you really do have to experience for yourself. If we're going to be discussing Korblox themed items, there's one item that we have to get out of the way first. You already know what it is. That's right. It's the toothpick leg. The Korblox Death Speaker bundle is almost exclusively known for its online data popularity nowadays, but I personally think that the rest of the bundle is extremely underrated. It's intimidating, the proportions are exactly right, and the hood kind of looks like a Dominus. The perfect combo. Some other cool Korblox items are the Korblox General package, which is great for any war-themed outfit, and the Udzal package, which doesn't really go great with any external hats, but on its own looks even more intimidating than Death Speaker, and the Golden Korblox General, which speaks for itself. If we're strictly looking at accessories though, some good ones are the Korblox Ice Crystal Circlet, which is one of the coolest members of the Crystal Circlet series, the Korblox King Hat, which is a subtle way to make your outfit twice as intimidating, and the Korblox Chosen Helmet, which looks like it was freshly dipped in lava. I'm also giving the Korblox Grand Marshal Hat an honorable mention because while it doesn't look good on its own, it does have fire particles, which is an instant plus in my book. Where Korbloxia really excels though is gears. There's the Korblox Skeleton Wraith, an enchanted bird skeleton with magic cold fire powers, the Korblox Ice Dragon, which you can ride on, and the Korblox Death Speaker Spellbook, which does this. Korblox items are actually generally very good. There are only a couple of bad ones, in fact, like the Savage Korblox General Bundle, the Korblox Ice Zombie Hat, and the original Korblox Death Speaker Hat, which looks like a bug. Fortunately, it's only canon to one of the 12 Death Speakers, so I'll let it slide. So obviously I wouldn't recommend trying to join this group nowadays, because, like I said, it's dead. But in its heyday, I think it must have been a very rewarding experience. General Grom's standards were barbaric. It was really hard to get promoted, and even harder to stay promoted, which is evident considering that before he stopped keeping up with the group, Grom demoted everyone in the group except 15 members to Ice Zombie for inactivity. There are currently 7 Mandibles, 2 Bladesmen, 1 Basher, no Elites, Chosens, or Assassins, and 3,500 Ice Zombies. It was an extremely tight ship, which meant that if you somehow got promoted to high rank, you really deserved it. Anyone who managed to even come close to Korblox Elite could probably kick practically anyone's butt in any type of combat, and it must have felt extremely satisfying to build yourself up to that point. It's a shame that they never really got to truly see any full-scale combat take place. There were discussions of a war between Korblox and Knights of the Splintered Skies taking place back in the day, but they couldn't agree on the types of weapons that should be allowed. Grom wanted only classic weapons like the Linked Sword, while Stickmaster Luke, the leader of the Knights of the Splintered Skies, wanted special group-themed weapons to also be allowed. So aside from miscellaneous raids, all that training was never really put to good use. But on the rare occasions when it could be put on display, I would imagine it was still pretty incredible to see. Next up is the Knights of the Splintered Skies, which is a pretty long name, so from here on out I'll be referring to them by their acronym KOS. Out of all the lore groups, this one is by far the most active and well-maintained. It sits at a whopping 49k members, and unlike Redcliff and Korblox, it actually has a well-advertised Discord server. Its current owner, Stickmaster Luke, apparently takes incredibly good care of it and is always interacting with the community. I found it kind of ironic that out of all the lore groups, this one was the most active, considering that they're kind of meant to be secondary characters in this story, but I won't knock the hustle. Let's see what it's like to be a KOS member. If you came here expecting some good KOS lore, I have some bad news. It's not done yet. They've been working on creating canon lore for themselves for months, and they're actually extremely close to being done. They're currently trying to hire a new writer so that they can finish, but to get this video out in a timely manner, Iron Giant 11 agreed to give me a basic synopsis of what they created so far. Here's what he said. 1,000 years ago, Lord Dukran, the founder of the Knights of the Splintered Skies, journeyed towards the mountains of Zargastan, the largest mountain in all the land. There he founded the Knights of the Splintered Skies, discovered the power of flight, and created our capital, Losindor. Now we guard the realms of the skies and prevent evil from invading our land. The vast majority of our kingdom is on top of the clouds themselves, protected by winged knights. With the present Korblox invasion, we are helping our allies Redcliff to stop the threat of the undead scourge that is Korblox. KOS also apparently received their power long ago from a celestial race called the Hydrians. Flight was not actually discovered by Dukran, but instead granted to him by something related to the Hydrians called the Divine Light. KOS also uses blessed magic from the Hydrians regularly for things such as healing and generating lightning strikes and tornadoes. In general, they're masters of everything to do with the skies, and they serve as an excellent middle ground between the battle-ready Redcliff and the wise wizards of the Astral Isles. Events in KOS are pretty much the same as Redcliff's. They conduct trainings frequently, and the locations for those trainings could be any one of several different well-built training facilities. The general styles of combat practiced in these trainings are a little different from Redcliff and Korblox's though. Because KOS is known for living in the sky and swooping down onto battlefields on wings, they put some emphasis on aerial combat, which is usually performed with gears like the Hydrian Elixir, which lets them grow wings for a short period of time. Because of their high member count, they also have some skilled scripters on hand, which allows them to script things like automated NPCs for trainees to spawn and fight even if they're alone for some extra practice. There are also a couple of sections of certain KOS-owned games that are specifically designed for Bard's Nights, and game nights are usually conducted through the Discord server. New members in KOS are referred to as Ascendants. To be promoted from there, and essentially every low rank, you need to obey the following commands. Carry yourself respectably. Keep to the rules. Be helpful to other members on the group wall and other places. Have absolute loyalty to the group over all others. Be kind, respectful, helpful, honest, hardworking, encouraging, and active. Show discipline, maturity, and the ability to lead. Show skill in combat, strategy, and parkour. Show complete knowledge in their lore. Create superb models, maps, scripts, etc. for the group. You can also be considered for a promotion by getting a lot of points during training, although these aren't as important as they are in Redcliff. You can get a point for completing an obby, winning a ranged or melee combat match against another trainee, winning a special game like King of the Hill or Capture the Flag, or being one of the top competitors in a free-for-all match. If you're an Ascendant, you can also skip to the next rank, Skyguard, if you complete the Ascendant Advancement course linked in the KOS guide. I actually did this, and it was fairly easy. You just have to read through the guide for the quiz questions and be decently good at obbies for the rest. The next rank after Skyguard is Avian Sentinel. That's followed by Knight, then Alar Knight, then Empyrean Protector. Then, once you reach Dragon Vanguard, you start to gain some moderation privileges. After that is Grand Artificer, at which point you're a full high rank and can start conducting things like trainings, game nights, and the like. From there, you can become a Divine Justicar. Then there's a special role called Luminary, which is reserved for retired and respected members of the ranks above it, the Firmament Commanders and the High Council. The last role, Aether Overseer, is reserved for Stickmaster Luke himself. KOS is the absolute king of training facilities and strongholds, and their games are some of the best that any of the lore groups have ever created. Each one is so extremely intricate, well built, and full of places to explore and things to do that I actually found it hard to decide which 3 games I should feature. There were just so many contenders. What I eventually decided was that the best games would have to be the ones that looked the most well inhabited. Some of their places were pretty intricate, but they didn't necessarily look like they could have ever been inhabited or used for anything other than training or battling. I found that their most pleasing places were the ones that were not only sprawling, but also seemed like they had some sort of history. The first place I selected was Fort Mistshire. Now, while it doesn't exactly have people in it, you can definitely tell that they show up there from time to time. When you spawn, you immediately notice a giant airship, and the place has weapons and KOS merchandise everywhere. There's even skeletons in this jail cell, and yet at the same time, it's an extremely peaceful location. There's vibrant plants and fungi all around, and a light fog over everything. It almost looks like a giant garden area, and it's a great place to just chill out after a training. Secondly, we have Civitatum Lucum, which is the complete opposite of Mistshire. It is absolutely bustling, with flying knight NPCs coming to greet you as soon as you spawn. It's packed with buildings. Unfortunately, there are some that you can't get into, but there are others that you can. The centerpiece of it all is an enormous castle covered in this cool decorative pattern, the only downside of which is that it makes the game really laggy. Yeah, this game could be optimized a bit more, but it still makes for a great experience. Finally, Finally, we have the capital city itself, Losindor. This is a pretty old game, and it definitely shows its age in some places, but it's so big that it totally makes up for it. It's a city similar to Civitatum Lucum, except it's much more expansive and with more NPCs and interactivity. It even lets you sprout a pair of white wings to fly around the map with, which gives you a whole new perspective on the game and really lets you feel like a Sky Knight. And it somehow does all of this while being less laggy than Lucum. It's definitely Koss's best game, and possibly the best lore group game overall. Now, if there's any category that Koss suffers in, it would probably be themed items, simply because they aren't quite main characters, so they aren't exactly the first priority on Roblox's plate. However, there are still some decent ones. The Alar Knight bundle is extremely underrated. It looks very powerful, and the helmet is a work of art. The winged headphones and shades are also extremely cool, but where Koss really excels is gear. I already mentioned this, but they have a potion called the Hydrian Elixir, which lets you sprout wings and fly around. However, I should also mention that it increases your attack power twofold and causes you to do damage to anyone you get near, making it probably one of the most overpowered potions on the catalog. There's also the Lightning Staff, which would look cool enough on its own, even if it couldn't shoot balls of lightning at people, and the Wind Summoner, which sends 4 massive tornado pillars towards your enemies and makes them and any nearby unanchored bricks go flying. There are definitely some items that look a little odd though. The Horned Helm kind of looks like it was meant to be a Korblox item and got reskinned at the last minute, and if you know me, you know I really can't stand these pauldron type items, especially considering that these ones are 750 Robux. But I think the award for weirdest Koss item would have to go to the item simply known as Wing, and that's because it's not a Koss item at all. It bears the Koss name, but those colors in that logo belong to the Wizards of the Astral Isles. Roblox straight up confused 2 of their properties with each other and then just never bothered to fix it. Why? We may never know. Okay, at the beginning of this video, I did say that Redcliff was a great choice for your first lore group to join, but I never said it was the best one. And that's because I would probably have to give that honor to Koss. They have the most members, the best games, the most active community, and an active Discord server to match. Plus, you don't have to spend any Robux to get that free promotion. It's overall extremely fun, with just a slight edge over Redcliff. The only downside is that Koss aren't the main characters of the official lore, but when you compare their membership levels to those of every other lore group, they may as well be at this point. The last group is the Wizards of the Astral Isles, which unfortunately is... which is unfortunate, but at least I was able to get a lot of information about the group from veterans like Kopiel on Roblox and Super on Discord. So let's see what it was like to be a wizard. Conveniently, high-ranking wizard Kopiel has the canonical beginning of the Wizards of the Astral Isles laid out in great detail on the dev forum. However, it's pretty long, so I'll be summarizing parts of it a bit. The Great War between Korbloxia and the other groups took place in the year 1324 IR. In that war, the Wizards' tower fell, and all of them were slain or enslaved. All except one, that is. Around 200 years later, 2 friends, Invidia and Zauber, aka Kopiel and Hypervoxel respectively, were following some research they had done that they thought would point them to the location of the last remaining wizard. Eventually, they reached their destination, a small brick house on the side of Mount Zargistan, guarded by a great forest. They entered the house, and after a bit of a scuffle with its inhabitant, found out that he was the son of the surviving wizard, and they had come to the right place. Unfortunately, though, it turned out that his father had died several years ago. And it also turned out that his father wasn't just any old wizard. This man was actually the son of the old archmage, the leader of the wizards, Hoththot. And because his father had died, this man had inherited the position. His name, of course, was Solar Crane. Apparently, Invidia and Zauber hailed from the Knights of Redcliff, and the reason they were researching the wizards in the first place was because they wanted to help build them back up again. Once Solar Crane knew that they would have the power of the Redcliff on their side, he agreed to start working, and they formed the next iteration of the Wizards of the Astral Isles. Invidia and Zauber were both granted honorable titles in this new guild. Invidia was dubbed High Scholar, the original teacher of everyone in the guild and the guild's prime researcher. Zauber was given the equally important title of Head Battle Mage, the organizer and director for all wars and battles. The guild eventually grew to great numbers. However, some began to grow less and less loyal towards the brothers. Invidia kept denying applicants to the archivist role, which they worried would cause the archive to become corrupted and spell the downfall of the guild. Meanwhile, Zauber was growing less and less present in the guild, and when he was around, he was often snappy and argumentative. One day, however, something happened that would dramatically shift the guild's prospects. You see, from its start, the guild had not really held down one particular territory. They were always wandering in an effort to prevent raids from the Dark Age ninjas. They carried with them a carved boulder that acted as a magical gateway to all their places of importance. On this particular day, they were moving down the northwestern coast of the main continent when suddenly a massive wave appeared on the horizon. Invidia refused to give the order to the wizards to make their way back inland, though, because someone had broken her glasses during during a recent training, and she couldn't see the wave. So the wave hit the wizards at full force and swept them all out to sea. Sometime later, they awoke. They immediately knew that something was off. Mossy structures and ancient statues surrounded them, and in the distance, slowly getting submerged in the ocean, were the flaming ruins of the castle that had just fallen out of the sky and created the giant wave that swept them away. They'd found a group of islands. They'd found a new home. Now, I'm pretty sure that they were trying to imply that the falling castle belonged to Koss, because they were mentioned earlier in the story, and they're the only lore group with floating buildings. However, I asked Iron Giant 11 if he could confirm this, and he said that Koss's involvement with the wizards is currently very minimal. So I'm guessing that that's just a piece of lore that they still need to get straight with each other. Still though, it's a surprisingly well-versed and interesting story for the least well-known of the lore groups. As far as I can tell, the only real events that happened in the wizards group were trainings. Nothing particularly special, mind you, just some basic obbies and dueling, with a focus on magic-based combat. There were also these courses of floating yellow rings that you had to fly through in rapid succession on the Pegasus gear. One thing I will give the wizards credit for is that they made it extremely hard to rise through the ranks. In fact, an argument could be made for the wizards' high ranks being harder to obtain than Korblox's. It started off decently easily. You began at the guild applicant rank and could rise to the apprentice rank if you obtained 2 points during a training. Just like Redcliff, the wizards gave points for doing things like completing obbies, winning duels, and generally doing well during trainings. However, the wizards required significantly more points for advancements than the Redcliff do. The next rank up, student, required you to obtain 4 points at a training, and for student elite, you needed 6 points. Next was a special role, Scholar of the Land, for people who made games for the group and people who were retired mid and high ranks. For your next rank, you could choose either Scholar or Wizard. Scholar was usually for those who were more into writing and research, while Wizard was for those who wanted to be involved in fighting and battle planning. For either of these ranks, you needed to get 7 points in a training, which I didn't even know was possible. Once you achieved that, you needed to be recommended for the position by 2 high ranks and complete a little challenge thought up by Nvidia herself called Research-Based Gladiosis. Now, the badge for completing this thing only has 12 owners, but I'm not sure why because it's pretty easy. All you have to do is complete this definitely not vague logic problem here about a bunch of animals and crystals that might just make you give up immediately if you're like me and don't realize that you have to enter the answers in from bottom to top and also click the animal displays themselves to enter in your crystal color choice. Then you have to complete this insanely long and difficult tower obby with like 6 large floors and almost as many checkpoints, with the last floor containing a criminally difficult wall wraparound that you'll probably fail about 100 times. Then just complete this 10 question quiz, whose first question's answer is actually wrong, there are technically 13 Korblox tribes, not 12, and whose 9th answer is unknowable unless you've already visited a different Wizard's Own game that you can't even get into if you're not in the group, like I wasn't when I first tried to complete this game, so you basically just have to guess for that one. And if you get a question wrong here, no big deal, you know, all it's gonna do is reset all of your checkpoints and send you back to the very beginning of the obby so that you can practice that devil wrap around 10,000 more times. Completely doable. Now, not to flex on you or anything, but yes, I did manage to get this badge, so if someone ever decides to revive the Wizard group, I think it's safe to say that I'm a shoo-in for that Archmage spot. Anyway, after that, if basically all of the high ranks liked you enough, you could be chosen to become an Archivist, which was essentially the first real high rank in the hierarchy. Archivists were in charge of hosting trainings and teaching the lore to others. High Scholar and Master Wizard were pretty much unobtainable as they were only to be filled in if Nvidia, the current High Scholar, or Zauber, the current Master Wizard, left, which they never did. After those roles though, there was one more role that it was possible to achieve called Council. For that though, you needed to be handpicked by Solar Crane. After that was a role reserved for Sorcus as a thanks for his time spent helping rebuild the guild, and finally, the Archmage himself, Solar Crane. The Wizards unfortunately did not have a lot of games, and the ones they did own have obviously not been updated in a while. However, I think they're currently trying to make somewhat of a comeback because there were a few places that seem particularly up to date. So those are the ones I'll be featuring. First, let's talk about Moongrip Isle. Moongrip Isle is supposedly an uncharted island that only the archivists of the Wizards of the Astral Isles know how to get into. It's surrounded by heavy walls, and the atmosphere is awesome. These giant statues everywhere look extremely foreboding, and that combined with the heavy fog and darkness everywhere gives it a sense of whimsical adventure, like you're 10 years old and you just snuck downstairs to play video games at midnight for the first time. If you want even more of that vibe though, your best bet is Copiale's remake of the Astral Sanctum. This game is definitely a major improvement over the original. In fact, the two look almost nothing alike. This remake looks like a realistic version of Super Mario Galaxy. Unfortunately, not just anyone can get into this game. When you first join, you spawn into a barren desert and have to click the Wizard's magic card Boulder to teleport to the actual game, which you can't do if you're not in the Wizards group, so unfortunately most of you probably won't be able to experience this for yourselves. However, if you do ever get in, you'll get to experience one of the most well-built, well-scripted, and most interesting training facilities out there. But I don't think it's their best game. That honor would probably have to go to Research-Based Gladiosis. Now yes, it is a nightmare to try and get through, but it's a rewarding one too. Every stage had me working incredibly hard, and I felt extremely validated when I got past each one. And the ending? Well, I won't give any spoilers, but I will say that you can tell a lot of effort went into it. Overall, for what it is, this game has an incredibly cohesive storyline, and even though it's not quite as good looking as Moongrip and the Astral Sanctum, it is an actual game instead of just a place to train. And there's something to be said for that, especially considering that it's one of the only lore group games that that does that and does it well. If you're looking for a way to feel like you've worked for your success, Gladiosis is definitely for you. Being the least known lore group also means that the Wizards have the lowest number of themed items, but they do still have some decent ones. The Astral Isle's Guardia is an excellent member of the Guardia series, and the Astral Isle Wings of Infinite Height are incredibly underrated. It's a shame they're off sale. The Rat Plague Summoner gear looks incredibly cool even though it doesn't work anymore, and the Pegasus, which actually still works, looks and feels even cooler, although it does fly a bit like it just had 35 Confusion spells cast on it. There's also this gear, the Limb Stretching spell, which, while it doesn't look particularly cool, has what is probably the funniest effect out of every gear ever. There are also some that aren't so great though. The Astral Isle's Initiate, for example, looks less like a wizard hat and more like a luchador hood, and I'm not too sure about the Astral Isle's Sentry either, but I think the weirdest of the wizard's hat lineup is the second Commander helmet, and not for looks. It looks fine. In fact, I think it's one of the better wizard's hats, but if you search Commander in accessories, you'll find it sitting right next to another hat called Knights of the Splintered Skies Winged Commander, which is exactly the same hat with the exact same price, with the name just changed. Yes, that's right. Roblox confused the wizards in cost not once, but twice, and still left it up. As a wise man once said, if I had a nickel for every time Roblox mixed up two of their own intellectual properties and never bothered to fix it, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. I can't really recommend the Wizards as a good first lore group to join, but I definitely think they were still very interesting. Their style of combat, building, and even lore is very different from the rest. While most of the groups just put a focus on battling, this one put an equal focus on research and knowledge. And they also use spells, a lot of them. That made doing combat with them a lot more complex, because you could never really tell what crazy effect they were going to pull out of their spellbook next. Overall, if you've been in military-oriented groups before and are looking for something different, I see no reason not to give this group a shot. So at the end of the day, what we're left with is 2 groups that are complete shells of what they used to be, and 2 groups that are still pushing on, trying to keep the interest in the official genre alive and well. We also have several other lesser lore groups that have either had nothing happen to them, or have just had very little public interest due to low exposure from Roblox. But it wasn't always supposed to be this way. There were supposed to be several monumental conflicts between the groups over the years, where everyone in them could finally show off their fighting skills, proving their worth to their superiors, and maybe even being responsible for the success of their entire group by single-handedly changing the tide of the war. But nothing like that ever happened, and when I examine all my research, I can think of only one reason for that. It's because they trusted Roblox. For the longest time, everything these groups did was based solely on what Roblox and the admins controlling their groups had to say. They refused to start fighting in that great war that they were promised until Roblox said they could, which they never did. Almost all of these groups had at least one high rank spot that could only be obtained if the owner of the group handpicked someone to obtain it, so if that owner went inactive, which over the years happened frequently, that meant an important leadership role in the group would never be filled. And nothing would ever be added to a group's backstory unless Sorkus, or a new Roblox item description, said it was canon. And they did have good reason to trust Roblox in the beginning, at least, because Roblox really had their back then. Blog posts and new items surrounding them were released insanely frequently. Roblox kept hinting at all the fun stuff they had planned regarding them, and they even gave out free hats to the Redcliff group for surpassing 1K members. But Roblox slowly started to lose interest in the groups. The new themed items they made stopped focusing on the actual story, and instead just became fueled by whatever the items creators thought sounded topical enough to seem canon. Once Roblox stopped showing interest in this story, the public slowly lost interest as well. And eventually, some groups, like Korblox, did start shifting away from the official lore and making their own rules, but by then, it was too late. However, a testament to the impact these groups left on Roblox is that they still have communities to this day. Redcliff and Koss are still going fairly strong, and believe it or not, so are the Emerald Knights of the Seventh Sanctum, who accepted my join request fairly quickly. Even the dead groups still have veterans floating around in places like the Loreverse community who would gladly talk for hours about cool stuff about their groups. They're also planning on building various games and stories in the coming years to bring those experiences to life for everyone to enjoy. It's clear that even after all these years, the legends that are Korblox, Redcliff, Koss, and the Wizards still live on, and probably will for years to come. So who knows what will happen next? Maybe Sorkus will finally get around to finishing his book, maybe someone will try to revive Korblox again, or maybe this video will somehow get a bunch of attention and the groups will get flooded with new members. Who's to say? All I know is, it's bound to be something awesome. That's about it. I've been Lord Nitrous, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!